So, I have a week before my vacation. Someone's doing fireworks outside. And when I took vacation in July, Matt was retired at that point. And he was retired for a few weeks already. And I remember like the Friday before I had to go back to work that following Monday, I had such serious Sunday night blues on Friday, knowing it was the last day of my vacation. And this week that I'm off, I get another week in November, right? So in the week of the 11th, we're gonna go see my sister and brother-in-law in Fort Lauderdale. And they're both retired. So I'm gonna be hanging out with 3 retirees, and I know I'm probably gonna get real pangs of retirement envy. At the end of this year, I will get my retirement match. So I have to stay until the end of this year, minimum. But then I'll also get like bonuses and stuff like that. So it just feels really wrong to leave in January. So never in my mind did I think I would leave in January. I might give notice sometime in the spring and then leave in July is what I'm thinking I'll probably end up doing. But then there's a part of me that is really enjoying this time in my career. I'm in such a groove with my bosses. I'm only 55. I mean, next year I turn 56, but do other people struggle with the idea of picking a retirement date? I got over it pretty quickly when, after I, am back to work. I sometimes think vacations are not really the best because when you have vacations, it kind of makes you wish that they were longer. So I think what I did wrong was not take more time in July. I should have probably taken 2 solid weeks together. And I've been in my career, what I'm doing now, for 25 years. And I know what it feels like to have a job where you go into work and you'd rather be anywhere else. I don't really have that with this place. I had that with my first corporate job out of when I first went into sales, and I had it significantly then. I was making good money and I was pretty good at it. I was a recruiter and I was good on the human element side, like placing candidates in jobs. So it was like a 2-part kind of thing where you would have to go to the company and get their job openings and convince them to, go into contract with you on the openings, and then you would fill the job. So I was not great at that part. It was like a little bit uncomfortable. Well, actually it was very uncomfortable. But I was really good at placing the candidates in the job. I think I understood what college entry-level graduates were looking for because I was one. And that was the area that I was recruiting for. So that's how I got that job. And I was good as well because I convinced them at some point in time that let me write the ads. I know what people are looking for, because you always have to have a pipeline to get the company to give you their openings and go into contract with you. You kind of have to have candidates that actually look like they could match the jobs that the employees were looking for as well. Anyway, shortly thereafter, I think I just came to the realization, every weekend I would really dread going back to work the following, Monday morning. And another thing about that job was the commute was torture. I mean, I lived in Long Island at the time, and I'd take the Long Island Railroad, and door to door, the entire thing was an hour and 45 minutes. And that was if you had perfect connections. You couldn't get it to be any better than an hour and 45 minutes each way. So that was a little bit hard, like as far as grueling. It didn't help to make the job enjoyable. But I did that for a while, and I eventually convinced them that they should let me go on one of the interviews that they had an opening for, because I just couldn't do it. I just didn't want to stay in the job anymore. And I remember one of the partners there was telling me, but you're making good money here. You could easily be making 70K this year. And this was back in 1998, so that was kind of a lot of money. And I left sales because it just wasn't for me, and I knew I wanted to be anywhere else. And I went into advertising, and that ended up, I took a pay cut, and it was probably one of the things that caused me to have problems with money too, because when you go from making a really high income and then you don't adjust what you're doing to make less money, yeah, you're going to struggle a bit. At that point in time, I was already living in the city, in Brooklyn, that is. And so I cut down my commute, and so when I took the advertising job, I knew I didn't want to keep that long commute, so I got an apartment closer, and where I could take the subway to work instead of the Long Island Railroad. And that definitely made the job much more enjoyable. I really enjoyed that job. I loved working in advertising. But there were problems with that job too that made me want to leave. And one of the big things were the time wasn't really my own. So I worked on a lot of Procter & Gamble accounts, so like Oil of Olay. Actually, it wasn't just Procter & Gamble. It was, Procter & Gamble put out Pantene, they were creating a new hair care line. It didn't end up, but it was in test marketing. Anyway, I really enjoyed that job. There were a lot of fun things about it, but one of the worst things about that job was my time didn't feel like my own, and it really infringed on my life. It infringed on my ability to, I had to get another job with that job, so I was working a lot on weekends because of my rent was too high. I mean, my rent was $650 and my take-home pay was $700, and I insisted I had to put money in my retirement, so I did. And so I had to work weekends. So that job, really not paying a lot, was one of the contributing factors of me leaving. And the other thing was my time not being my own. It could be $4.55, and the next thing you know, the client wanted, a couple of print ads, or you had to go make a reel of like their television commercials, and then go down to the studio, go make the reel, and then mail it out to them. So every single night I get stuck working there, doing overtime that didn't really pay well. And I was, my time wasn't my own. So I started to develop a lot of anxiety, that I would always feel so stressed as 5 o'clock was approaching. And the next thing you know, someone would come up to you at 4:55 and expect you to stay late. And you had to stay late, you had to get it done. If the client needed something and they were promised something, you would have to get something out to FedEx to them by the next morning. So I stayed at that job for about 2 years, and although there was opportunities within, I kind of felt like I'm gonna go and get my master's. It was just too low money, even if I was gonna jump into something else. And during, while I was in high school, my earlier years in high school, I took a lot of secretarial courses, so I learned shorthand, typing, just the things that you would need. And I thought to myself that, I really probably could just transition into that role, because there were a lot of college entry roles looking for, assistants, so you could move through the ranks of the company. And so that's how I landed where I am. And I started out, and it was a big pay jump. So I went from like making, I think at the time I had gotten a raise and I was making 30, and I jumped to 45. And 45 was pretty good. It was pretty, it actually felt like I I was treading above water. I was able to start living better. And then I met my husband too, and we got engaged, and he moved in with me, and sharing the bills definitely helped as well. And so that was yeah. And I ended up staying with that career and staying at that company for almost 18 years. And one of the things I really liked about that job was, although overtime, there was a lot of overtime associated with it, back then, during that time of my life, I was a real gym rat. I mean, I worked out every day. I ran. I was training for the marathon in the early 2000s. I was trained for 1999, 2000, and I actually ran it in 2000. And I remember I did so much overtime at that job that I just started to feel like I was there late. I was constantly being there late at night. So I decided I'm just not going to come in at 9, because other people would do that. Like, they would just come in a little bit later. But that wasn't really cool with my boss. He did not like me doing that. And I mean, he was a really good guy, and so he was one of those people who would just never talk behind your back. If he had something to say, he would say it to you. And so he complained to me about me, basically. And he was like, "You're late every day. This is not right. You're late." And so every day I would hear it. And one day I just said to him, "Well, why don't you just consider my hours as being 10 o'clock? Because I'm here till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. So no matter what, I'm working an 8-hour day." And he would work 14 to 15 hours a day. This man was a maniac. He worked so much. But he was making a lot of money, and I was just making 45K, right? So, or maybe at the time I was making 46 or 48. I might have gotten like a raise, by then. And he, like, after I said that to him, and I had the guts to say that, and he was a good guy, and he's like stopped in his tracks and like thought about it for a second. He goes, "You know what? You're right." And so from that point on, I started working at 10 o'clock, and I didn't have to be in at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I didn't feel that 9 to 5 rut that a lot of people feel, because I felt like I had a bit more flexibility. And sometimes that 10 would be 10:15, but I always made up for it on the back end. And it worked out really well. And then what ended up happening is, one of the people I work with, where I work with now, used to be at my prior firm, and there was a lot of transition going on. There was a lot of people that being let go because there was a buyout. And watching everybody being cut, that was really, really hard for me. And I think out of a handful of EAs, I was one of 3 that were left, and everybody was getting these wonderful packages. And I wanted to leave, because at that point, my boss was so near retirement. He was constantly complaining because these jobs, it's their rules. And originally I was working for 2 people, and then because they were bought out, there was a buy and hold period. And during the buy and hold period, they didn't make any changes, but their support model was very different from where I worked. So the next thing you know, I'm working for 3 people, then I'm working for 4 people, then I'm working for 5 people, and then I'm working for 6. Well, you can't be an executive assistant when you're working for 6 people. That's like a watered down team assistant. And so I didn't like it, and I reached out, and there was nothing because of the buyout, the partners themselves had to stay for a couple of years, but there was nothing they could do as far as trying to make the conditions better for the people that were there. So I ended up leaving and going to, a competitor, basically. I don't think he really appreciated that. I think he was really upset with me. But I had to do what I had to do for me, because I wanted to go back to the model where I supported 2 partners, because it wasn't what I signed up for, and I just didn't like it. It was back to that feeling of not liking my job, and all I wanted to do was leave. Plus, because they had let go of so many people after the buy and hold was over, it was depressing. Like, to be there when everyone you know is gone, and it's just new people. And not that everybody was nice. There was nothing about the people that I was working with. All the newbies that I worked with from the prior company were nice, but they were used to the model of working for 6 people. And so, yeah, that wasn't for me. Anyway, I've been at this current employer for 7 years and change. And I thought my boss would retire when I thought he was going to retire, and he has decided to stay on. And so when I originally took the job, I thought that we would leave together, and we talked about leaving together. And so I'm feeling incredibly guilty because he changed it. He changed when he's going to leave. And not that he made a decision and he could decide to leave whenever he wants, but he brought me into the firm. So there's a sense of guilt that I feel for wanting to leave. But then there's I don't know, I feel like I have to be selfish again and do what's good for me. And I'm definitely, I promised in June of last year, like every June would come around, and lately what I've been doing is deciding 1 year at a time if I'm going to work the following year. And so, and I know I have to work till at least December 31st, because it doesn't make sense for me to leave before then, because the way my employer contributes to the retirement, if you're not there on December 31st, that entire year you worked, you won't get your match. So you kind of have to be there till December 31st. So I'm not walking away before then. And even now, if I were to give my notice, it would include it, but I would feel too uncomfortable to give notice that close, because they could let me go and then I could get nothing, for the entire year, and that would really upset me. So, yeah. It's either I decided in March of next year to stay on, or try to hold out a little bit longer and see, because he might stay till the March of the following year. Anyway, I'm sharing all this, and I know it's because I know the decision has to be made, and I have to think about it, and I don't really, I could see that little buggy coming for me. You're like me. I could see the decision is coming, and I know I have to think about it, and I've been pushing it to the back of my mind. I mean, there's a part of me that's been planning for retirement since the day I started working. I should be excited and really want to do this, and I know the retirement envy, when I came over the summer, it was intense. I was so depressed, and I really, really liked my bosses. So it's not about that, but it was so intense to know that Matt didn't have to go back to work, and I did. And so knowing that in a week when I go on vacation, I'm going to be hanging out with 3 retirees, I know that's going to make going back to work feel like not going to be too happy about it. I feel like it's going to make me, I don't want to make a premature decision. I want to think all of it through. And then I think to myself, if I work till January, since I'm there in January, I would want to be able to take advantage of putting as much money as I can in my retirement and try to reach the max. So I don't know what it's going to be for next year yet. Maybe it's going to be like $31,000 since I'm over 50. So it could be, yeah. So it's $23,000 this year for anyone under 50, and then the $7,500 catch up. So that puts me at $30,500, I think. Yeah, $30,500 that I'm allowed to put in, and I've already reached that. Max. So if I am working next year, I'll want to do that again. But I might do it in a Roth if I decide to stop working, and instead of taking the money out pre-tax, I'll take it out and not get the tax benefit, particularly if I decide to stop working in June or the end of June, really July 5th. I would want to stay on and get my July 5th. I don't know, that's just how my mind works. But then if I'm there till July 5th, I'm a little bit worried about that 1-year syndrome. Why wouldn't I just stay till and take some vacation and stay and get my match from my employer? And I'm so close. I'm 9 months away from possibly when my boss might retire. But yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. Anyway, would love to know if other people struggle when it came to making their decision. That sense of guilt I'm feeling, it's probably like, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to regret not retiring. But then again, time just goes so fast. So I'm at a real, it's tough. Anyway, would love to know if anyone else who has retired, if they struggle with their decision, or anyone who's close to retiring is struggling with their decision, feeling guilty, not sure what they want to do. I mean, people really only retire once, right? I mean, I don't want to, I know we saved enough, so it's not about, well, there was part of me considering working longer if we were going to buy a house in Long Island. I want to be working if we were going to do that, but I think I'm going to put that on hold and wait till we do it sometime in our retirement, because early on I think I want to do more traveling and stuff. And that whole thing that happened in Florida, dealing with all the storms, I don't know, sometimes less is more. Maybe when we sell our apartment in Brooklyn at one point, then maybe we can get a house somewhere else. But for now, I'm not going to stay just because we're going to buy a property at one point in the future. Anyway, yeah, this is how my mind works. I ruminate and I think about things, and I know other people are the same way and maybe struggling with their retirement date and thinking about what they're going to do. And I'm sitting on my roof talking to myself, and I'm still a little camera shy. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye.